Welcome to Trinity Officer Training. I'm Pastor Chris, and this is Session 3, the Trinity Leadership Model. I'm glad you're here. Let's take a look at where we are so far. In our previous sessions, which you can find at our officer resource page, the link's there on your screen, we've had 2 sessions so far, both of them run by the Theocademy Project of the Synod of Mid-America. Session 1 talked about ordered ministry in the PCUSA, and then Session 2 talked about being leaders in the PCUSA. These 2 sessions give a really good, solid groundwork for a theology of leadership. So if you haven't had a chance to watch those, I'd really encourage you to spend some time with them. But today's focus is the Trinity model of leadership. We're going to be applying that theology of leadership from those first 2 sessions from the Synod to our specific community here at Trinity. So let's take a look at what we're going to cover today in our session. First, we're going to review our role as ministry leaders in the church. Then we're going to be comparing 2 styles of ministry leadership, looking at the strengths and weaknesses of those styles. And then we'll be exploring practical applications of our leadership model. But before we dive into looking at some practical applications, I want to make sure that we review our role as ministry leaders in the church. All the tasks we do in ministry, they are important, but all of them relate back to the one key role that we're all part of. Ordered ministries are gifts to the church so that the ministry of the whole people of God may flourish. It's found in the Book of Order in chapter 2 of the governance section, and I think it's a beautiful image for what we do as leaders. We aren't here for the institution that is the church. We are here for the whole people of God. All of our work should be guided by what will help the collective ministry of the church flourish. That's a pretty high order, but it's what we are called to do as leaders in the church of Jesus. So let's look at 2 different models of leadership. The first I'm calling a traditional leadership model. It's something that we're probably pretty familiar with. It is based in hierarchy, sharply defined responsibilities, clear roles, a focus on structure. In traditional leadership, there's a focus on one individual or a small group having all the answers and then delegating the work of the different tasks to other people in the organization to implement and carry out. It's a very top-down model. If we think of it, it looks like this kind of an organization chart. This is probably familiar to a lot of us. Some of the strengths in this structure of leadership is it can be very efficient at defined and well-known tasks. This kind of structure is really good at doing the same things over and over and over again. There are clear expectations of what different roles are going to do, and we're familiar with it because it parallels the business world, government structures, and military models of leadership. But there are some weaknesses as well. In this model, it's hard to respond to new systems and challenges that don't fit neatly in the structure. If there's a piece that kind of comes along and we don't know where to fit it in, well, eventually that new opportunity may just go away. We also can end up with what a lot of folks call silos of information. You can see these vertical patterns in the chart. Well, if there is something happening in one part of the organization and something similar happening in another, there isn't always a good line of communication between those 2 groups. And so that can sometimes lead to duplication of effort, poor communication, and in the worst cases, conflict within the system. It's not really healthy. Another weakness to this system is that if there are people who are outside the system that don't fit into the box, they can try and get our attention, but they may not fit into the system. And again, we lose those relationships. Finally, there is a sense that responsibility for everything that happens lies at the top, and that can lead to a break in buy-in from folks at the top level of leadership and the rest of the organization. So if there are some challenges to this model of leadership, then what's another way? Well, there are different terms for it, but I'm going to use the term collaborative or shared leadership. If we think of traditional leadership as vertically oriented, then collaborative leadership can be thought more as a horizontal model of leadership. There's less focus on hierarchy and more recognition that each person brings a variety of gifts to the work of leadership. If traditional leadership is top-down, we can think of collaborative leadership more like the Trinity knot you see on your screen. Interwoven relationships where we recognize that our work is not done in isolation, but within a system. There are a lot of strengths to this model of collaborative leadership. It's a lot more flexible in a changing world, and I think we can all agree that we're in a changing world. It's more open to communication if it's done well and we agree to play along, and it can be more receptive to new voices because there aren't firm, rigid structures for the way things happen. There's also responsibility for success at all levels of the organization. Everyone in the team is part of the same network. There's no clear top, middle, and bottom. Of course, there are some weaknesses as well in a collaborative model of leadership. Sometimes decisions can take longer because we're working hard to get buy-in from different members of the organization and the congregation. It can feel less familiar. It might be a little strange to be in a system of leadership where there isn't a clear single point leader. And it can be hard because communication becomes so important. If we're not used to doing clear and frequent communication, a collaborative model is going to be a little harder for us. Thankfully, the Presbyterian model of leadership is already designed in a collaborative way. We're going to take a look at the three main roles that we have within ordained leadership in the church, and I think you're going to see that the structure ends up looking a lot like the Trinity knot we were looking at earlier. First, we have ruling elders who are responsible for governance and discernment within the church. Then we have deacons who have the responsibility of compassion and witness, and then finally pastors who do the work of word and sacrament. In the church, no one person is called to do everything or to be an expert in everything. We need one another to do the whole work of the church. Our task as leaders within the church is to take the strengths of a traditional model of leadership, like our committee structure, it does kind of have that organizational chart feel to it, and then pair them with the strengths of a collaborative model. We'll talk about co-chairs here in a little bit, and help Trinity grow into more of an open and flexible community. Now let's take a look at some practical applications of this idea of collaborative or shared leadership here at Trinity. A good model is nice, it's helpful, but if we don't have practical ways to apply it to our work and ministry, then it really doesn't do a whole lot for us. So I really want to focus on these practical applications. The first thing we'll talk about in collaborative leadership is the idea of a co-chair model for our committees. Starting in January of 2020, we moved from a chair and vice chair model to a co-chair model. We introduced this at our winter 2019 officer training. The theology behind this is that deacons and elders have different callings. You'll remember on the previous slide where we showed that elders are governance and discernment, deacons are compassion and witness. We have different callings and different roles, but one of them is not more or less important or more or less valuable than the other. Our previous system of chair and vice chair often resulted in the deacon member on a committee being seen as the assistant rather than a partner in leadership. The co-chair model aims to correct that perception and to make sure that we're aware that our elders and our deacons, yes, we have different callings, but we are joint partners in the work of ministry. We do collaborative leadership. Each committee has 2 or 3 co-chairs, and most committees have a mixture of elders and deacons. The specific breakdown, of course, is going to vary by committee and which of the gifts we need in different places. But our goal across the board is to have a mixture of different officers in different places so we bring all of our gifts to the work of the church. In different committees, there are going to be different roles, different tasks that need to be done, and it's up to the co-chairs to determine how to best accomplish these roles. You might, in some committees, divide the roles I'm going to talk about here in a moment up between the 3 co-chairs or the 2 co-chairs. You might bring a non-actively serving officer, one of your regular committee members. You might bring them in to help with one of these roles. It really depends on the gifts of the people you have serving on that community. So let's look at these 3 roles. First, you have the role of moderation. This is the person who makes sure the committee meetings flow, that there's a good agenda, and they can navigate the active leadership in the midst of the meeting. Then you have someone who's going to make sure that you have good records kept, that you have a clerking function, right? Someone that's going to take minutes, someone that makes sure that communication with the treasurer happens. And finally, you have someone who is responsible for communication, both within the committee, but more importantly, to other leaders and to the rest of the congregation. On our officers resource page, there is a PDF that goes into a lot more detail on our shared leadership model, and it has some specific suggestions on how each role might function in your committee. I want to encourage you to take a look at that guide and then sit down and discuss this model with the other leaders on your committee. See who feels led to serve as moderator, who feels led to serve as clerk. Is there someone who finds communication a fun and exciting thing to do? They really want to write those articles for the newsletter. You're probably going to find that there are good gifts on your committee to accomplish these tasks in a collaborative manner that doesn't place all the responsibility on one person and helps share the load of leadership. Collaborative leadership is also important when we talk about inter-committee collaboration. There are going to be times when there's a project that doesn't fit neatly into one committee or any committee. Those are times for more communication between groups. Maybe it's a time that our worship committee needs to pair up with our Christian education faith formation committee. Maybe it's a time that generosity needs to pair up with mission. There are all sorts of opportunities for us to think outside our traditional committee structure. And this idea of collaborative leadership, that we're all in the work together, that's really important. I want to remind us again, our goal here is so that the ministry of the whole people of God may flourish. That's why we're doing what we're doing. It's not so that one specific committee gets all the praise. It's not so that one group is able to do the thing that they want to do. It's so that we focus on the good of the whole people of God. And we remember that this goal of serving the whole people of God means we're going to serve not just Trinity members. We should always seek to do what is right, even if it doesn't fit neatly into our leadership system, even if it's hard or uncomfortable, because it means that we're meeting our obligations. So we're left with this general principle. More collaboration and communication is better than less. At the end of the day, that's the big takeaway. So in summary, today we've talked about the role of ordered ministries here at Trinity, that we're working for the flourishing of the whole people of God. We've also talked about our goal of embracing a shared and collaborative model of leadership, and we've talked about some practical ways to do that through co-chairs and broader collaboration in our ministry. Thank you so much for taking part in this session today. I hope it has been helpful and meaningful to you. I want to invite you to go to the officer's resource page, and if you haven't already, pull down the reflection sheet. It has some questions that I would encourage you to spend some time thinking and praying about today. I look forward to seeing you on session 4, Trinity Leadership Logistics. But between now and then, if you have any questions or I can be of service, please reach out and let me know. Thanks, and have a great day.